anyone who follows me on Twitter or has watched my channel like more than once knows I fucking hate James O'Brien. My God, he boils my fucking piss, right? Because he will complain like all the time about issues that are going on with regards to um Boris Johnson's government, all the kind of scandals that he's going through, all the issues that have been created due to how many the last having 3 years of the Boris Johnson, I guess 2.5 years of Boris Johnson administration. Right? He'll complain about all of this stuff and go, "Isn't it terrible? Oh God, why do people continue to support Boris Johnson when he spent the entirety of the 2019 election campaign just completely undermining the opposition, right? And trying to be both sides these issues when there really wasn't it really wasn't both sides. Really, people were telling him forever, the entirety of the time, that the Boris Johnson was not so his will to be prime minister, and he still continued to act like that there wasn't massive issues with Boris Johnson as a candidate, and b complete continuing to undermine the opposition with a bunch of kind of vacuous bullshit. And now there's a segment that's been put up on LBC saying James O'Brien's epic takedown of the government and media's false reality. I'm like, okay, well, brilliant. There's always been a kind of government media false reality, right? But it's interesting that he picks this up now, right? As he picks it up 3 years down the line after, using his platform to make sure that Boris Johnson won the fucking election, despite the fact that I think he voted Labour at the time, whatever, but I digress. Even so, it's clear that his wishy-washy, both sides nonsense helped to contribute to the kind of the media narrative at the time that helped Boris Johnson win the election, but I digress. Regardless, this is his segment. We talk about the media's false reality that we have now, as if that's not always been the case. Should be an interesting way in which we can view into the mind of the liberal and the way in which things just kind of pass them by for an incredibly long time until we go past the point of hypernormalization, and then they start realizing that maybe things aren't quite as cut and dry as they used to think, and they're kind of their the politics of normality were never quite as normal as they really thought they were. So let's take a look.
Um, it's a weird one again today. I've sort of thought about this a lot when stories appear in the news that we really shouldn't be talking about. And then you sort of think, well, it's government policy, and it is therefore something that we should be talking about. I don't know when it snaps. I don't think it can. I think this is part of the reason that Donald Trump is still dancing around America, claiming that he won the election. Our systems, I've mentioned this to you a few times, our systems are simply not built to cope with a level of lying that we're now seeing on both sides of the Atlantic. It's not. I mean, I presume that there are Conservative MPs looking at.
I think it's the issue that I have here is this idea that people weren't just lying profusely before now, like. when the CIA spent decades and decades just covering up the coups that they orchestrated in countries around the world, and people just were completely just blindsided by it. The way in which people were just taught lies about about history, or were taught selectively about history and the things that we should or shouldn't feel proud for being British, right? Or being American, I guess. And in the same case, obviously, he's talking about Donald Trump here, right? The idea that just Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are the first people to lie as a government, or the media would lie about them to the people, is just it's like a kind of childish understanding about politics. Just because they're oafish, just because they're not as reserved as people like Theresa May or Mitt Romney or Barack Obama or whatever. That doesn't mean that they're not. That doesn't mean that this is the first time politicians have been insincere. If anything, politicians are notoriously insincere. Politicians have been insincere since time immemorial. The idea that he just thinks that we're just past kind of the tipping point now is just kind of it's typical kind of liberal framework to understand these issues.
At what's going on and just thinking, this is just insane. I can't actually break cover. I can't join the 20-odd MPs who have actually publicly acknowledged the existence of reality and announced that they can't put up with Boris Johnson for any longer because I'm worried about X, Y, or Z, or I've got ambitions in that department, and what if he survives? Then my chances of promotion have disappeared. So there's reasons why people can't tell the truth.
But even then, like, these talk about, especially talk about people, putting in like their notices of no confidence in Boris Johnson. It's like, well, hang on a minute, right? Okay, why is it just now that they're entering voice of no confidence? And you see fucking liberals in the quote tweets. You see the liberals in the quote tweets all saying, "Oh, I'm glad that there are only some Conservative MPs who are showing decorum, who are treating these issues with the gravitas that they deserve, finally showing a backbone." I'm like, are they really showing a backbone? They've spent, fucking a decade of being Tory MPs for an incredibly long time. They've seen, like the disasters wrought by the Cameron and May administrations, right? And it's just now that you feel like, just because they're criticising Boris Johnson, you're happy to lionize them as members of Parliament. I think your barrier for what constitutes respect for Conservative MPs is really fucking low.
joining in with the lies. There's like different levels of complicity, isn't there? I think silence is compliance in a way, but it's not as bad, surely, as actually amplifying or repeating the lies. And our systems don't know how to cope with it. The American Constitution, for all the sterling efforts of the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton and his mates, the Constitution just wasn't designed to cope with somebody who would lie as freely and as easily as Donald Trump. And now we're seeing the sort of slightly watered down British equivalent in that I want to talk today about imperial measurements because the government has announced a review again into possibly bringing them back, but they have never been taken away.
This has always been the case. It's literally always been the case that politicians will just kind of will use this kind of dead cat strategy, right? Where people are talking about something that you don't want them to talk about, so you'll just kind of put like a wedge issue or like a silly policy out there to be able to distract people from like other issues that are far more kind of economically prescient or whatever. Like for example, in the 90s, I also about this, the way in which kind of ravers were demonized. There's a big kind of panic about raver culture in our society when it was just a way of trying to be able to distract people away from the failures of the Conservative Party at the time when the back to basics thing was all kind of crumbling down upon John Major, right? And you could see the polls swinging wildly to John Smith current at that time. And it was just another dead cat. It's just another dead cat, right? Like, I'm sorry. This was the time in which we had we had an MP asphyxie wank himself to death during the 90s. We had all of the kind of the uh the marital infidelity from the people preaching family values. There's always been scandal. There's always been policies that have been done and narratives that have been woven to be able to distract people from the political reality. Right? The idea that you're just getting it into your head now is just it's just terminal lip brain. That's what it is. I'm gonna say that a lot over the course of this segment, but it just really gets my goat. The level to which liberals just go, well, the systems they've been fine for so long. Why are they breaking now? As if the system hasn't literally always been broken forever.
The front page of the Mail on Sunday.
Yeah, the Loner Box video about conservatives lying, like the idea of the noble lie, right? And if you tell one noble lie, it will maintain societal cohesion, right?
Yesterday claimed that the European Union had banned the use of the crown stamp on pint glasses, which is categorically and demonstrably untrue. I got sent a photograph of someone enjoying a pint in real time in Malta from a glass that had the actual crown stamp on it, and Malta is in the European Union. It also had the CE mark on it as well, which allows manufacturers to sell goods freely across 20-odd countries with no additional checks. But if you want to have a crown on it as well, you can. If you want to have Heineken stamped on the side of a glass, you can. If you want to have, I don't know, you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps, stamped on the side of a pint pot, you can. So the idea that you weren't allowed to have a crown on it it's palpably and demonstrably ridiculous. But we live in a country.
Was there any? I've not seen any articles anywhere or any kind of conservative statements for any politicians saying, "Oh well, now we can have the crown back," as if it never went away. But I think it's more kind of pushing things towards wanting to rebuild this love of the monarchy that's just kind of died in the wake of Meghan and Harry, and in the wake of fucking Prince Andrew's scandal or whatever. Because clearly people fucking hate the monarchy right now. God knows I do, right? And they're clearly seeing young people drift away from the monarchy as like a British relic, right? Which is good, right? Young people overwhelmingly don't support the monarchy, right? Or at least don't care enough about the monarchy. And so there's just kind of this drive from a political lens to try and rebuild this love of the British royal family that it's not been passed down the generations, right? But again, like who fucking cares? Like that's a political project. It's not, they're not just lying for the sake of it. There's a political project to build that kind of thing. Again, and that's been happening in politics forever. That's not new. People doing that, James. That is not new. Admitting the system is the problem means that admitting that systemic change is necessary rather than just tinkering the edges. Hence why liberals refuse to see the wood for the trees tree. I mean, they just are unfortunately they are just crippled with this innate idea that they can't see anything further than the system as it exists already. Right? They are both blessed and cursed with this lack of vision. Right? And with regards to like the pounds and metric thing, like the imperial metric thing that's going on, like previously you had to sell in metric at some point, but I think what he's saying here now is that you can sell in both metric and imperial. You can now sell in just imperial with these new rules, which again is boomer bait. Like it's boomer bait. It's getting people back around on the nostalgia pandering. I don't think it'll work, but I can understand why they're doing it.
Country now where it's front page news in what I think is the best-selling Sunday newspaper in the country. Do you see what I mean about the system not being equipped to cope with lying on this level? That's a major newspaper. So you look at it and you think, presumably, unless you're lucky enough to be tuned into this programme every day for your daily dose of truth and reality, you look at that and you think, well, sounds a bit rum. That I'm sure I had a pint pot with a crown on it in Malta last summer when we were there on our holidays. But
Well, it's hardly lying about the coup against Mossadegh, is it? I mean, it's hardly lying about something that actually matters. I mean, like the fact that he's treating like somebody lying about like the crown stamp on a pint glass as being some kind of apocalyptic political misdemeanor. It just this fucking obsession that liberals have with decorum. The fact that liberals they lose their shit about Partygate, but they can't be asked to care about the COVID mismanagement or all the crony contracts or a decade of austerity, right? Those are just kind of oh dear political disagreement on policy things. But as soon as the prime minister goes to like the illegal party, has a slice of cake, no, my beloved decorum, what have you done? Right? It's just a fucking yeah, it's a lie, whatever. But it's just a fucking. It's so understandable why it's being done. And he's acting so personally offended by such a completely fucking innocuous mistruth.
well, I mean, this is a newspaper. They wouldn't be able to print abject rollicks on the actual front page unless there was a sort of scintilla of truth in it. Yes, they would. They would, and they do. And that's why I sort of have a curious mixture of bewilderment and amusement on days like
Yeah, no coverage. Happy to he's happy to complain. He's happy to complain about the papers lying about the pint glass not having the stamp on it anymore, or having the stamp re-added or whatever, or them being banned by the use. Happy to report on these. But is he giving the same amount of airtime for the Trojan horse scandal, like the explicit political lie that was used to demonize the entirety of Muslims in this fucking country? No, it's not. It doesn't give any of the same airtime to that incredibly large political lie propagated by Theresa May's administration. Right? It was Michael Gove at the time. Right? Is he giving that the same amount of airtime to this fucking story about the crown stamp on the fucking pint glass? Of course he fucking isn't. He's just oh god, it really just does my nut in. Just like how like the level to which the liberals just don't have just like their sense of proportion is just like completely fucked.
this. It's a little bit like looking at the picture on the wall and wondering why other people in the room are pretending it's a picture of a tractor when it's clearly a picture of a bloody horse. It's just bizarre to see the effort that people put into perpetrating
And he
these.
won't talk about like the huge like mind bending mistruths about trans people that are put in the media because obviously he's fucking transphobe himself, isn't he? So he's got his Shinigami eyes as red. Like if he was so concerned about calling out media manipulation tactics, why is he still on LBC sharing a platform with Nick Ferrari, who literally spends days and days and days every morning show using his platform to ask Labour MPs about fucking genitalia, right? If he's so concerned with ridiculous distracting media narratives, right? Why is he allowing Nick Ferrari just to use trans people as a cultural wedge issue on his on to share that platform, or not calling him out? Of course he fucking doesn't.
Nonsenses. But then you have the other problem, and this is something I wrestle with quite a well. Wrestle's a bit strong. Tussle. This is something I tussle with quite a lot. Is that should we talk about something that's obviously bonkers? But then I look back over the last few years, and I think not talking about stuff that's obviously bonkers probably acts as a form of fertilizer on the bonkersness, and the bonkersness grows and flourishes because those of us who care and know about the truth don't talk about it because we don't think it's necessary in the face of so much public bonkersness. So I don't know what an example would be. We came a little bit late to the woke party, didn't we? This ludicrous confection, this invented problem that the country is somehow on.
He is right that the whole woke thing is an invented problem. It is specifically it's the cultural wedge issue, right? And of course he was late because he's a fucking liberal, right? It's just like they were late to the rise of fascism in the United States. Like just how it was a ContraPoints video fucking 4 years ago saying, oh, what's going to happen with these mass shooters if they're all, being emboldened by online, far right radicalization, and all the liberals fucking ignore you, saying, oh, it's just frogs on the internet, it's just okay signs, right? And then, next what happens, we see what we're seeing right now.
Under threat from wokeness or from critical race theory or whatever other nonsenses people are coming up with to essentially just accrue power or money or profile for visiting like a sort of greatest hits of bigotry and bonkersness. So should we talk about the stuff that's bonkers? Or should we completely ignore it? And then, just when you think my burdens could get no heavier, and thank you for the epic amounts of sympathy and violin playing that are currently sweeping the country, just when you think my personal stroke professional burdens could get no bigger, you note that if the government is doing it, if they're turning it into a major announcement, if this is something that is being held up as a, wait for it, a benefit of Brexit, then you have to talk about it because it's actually in the national interest to point out how pathetic it is. It is, if you like, a sort of professional duty almost, surely, for you and
And this, what's interesting is like James O'Brien is a fucking he is like the king of the Ramonas. He's the Pied Piper of the Romaniacs, right? That's what James O'Brien is. And there was an explicit lie told in the election pledges of Boris Johnson, right? I talked about this on the United Ireland panel, where Boris Johnson lies to the public about the Northern Ireland Protocol being part of the oven-ready Brexit deal, right? Because he'd already told Ian Paisley Jr. in the DUP that they didn't plan on implementing the Northern Ireland Protocol at all, and it was just in the manifesto to win the election. He explicitly said that to Ian Paisley Jr., who said that on the BBC. Any coverage from James O'Brien? No, nothing.
for me to talk about reality when the major forces of government and media are increasingly dedicated to punting a completely alternative false reality where you couldn't put a crown on a pint pot for the last 20 years, where you couldn't buy a quarter of aniseed balls for the last God knows how many years, where somehow you had to leave the European Union in order to procure the vaccines that we procured a couple of years ago. It's all untrue. It's categorically and provably untrue. But the government are selling it to the people.
And again, these are all things that he's correct about, but he's just so late on the boat because he thinks that it's explicit. He thinks that this is somehow like unique to the society that we see at the moment, rather than just the job of the media since time immemorial. This what no Chomsky does to a motherfucker. Yes, James, that's exactly what you should do. You should ignore it, ignore the distractions and nonsense, and focus on what actually matters. You're literally a journalist, mate. True! Fucking true! Like, this was the guy I said previously who used his platform to play both sides with regards to Johnson versus Corbyn in 2019. Literally used his platform to try and undermine the opposition to an incredibly dangerous person like Boris Johnson that he's now admitting is a dangerous person, right? Saying, like, we're seeing all these lies from the British Donald Trump. And, like, he was Prime Minister for a year and he was doing the same thing previously. Yet you were saying, oh, I don't know about Jeremy Corbyn, we can't just nationalise things. Like, you're a journalist, it's your fucking job, right? And people will go around, like, I've spent, oh god, right, story time. I commented on a TikTok of Rory Stewart saying, oh, there's no new ideas in politics. And I commented saying, well, hang on a minute, no, there were new ideas in Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto, right? People on the left have been giving you new ideas for a very long time, but explicitly in Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto, there were new ideas. And all the replies were just like a flood of people going, huh, nationalisation, that's just an idea from the 1970s. As if, okay, so what other policies were in the manifesto? Oh no, you want to nationalise everything. Is it? Do you know what the right to own was? Do you know what the inclusive ownership fund was? Of course you fucking don't. Because people like James O'Brien didn't fucking report it. It's their jobs to report what is going to be, in the run-up to election, what is going to be proposed by an administration, right? It's like a footnote in a BBC article of, like, the manifestos at a glance. And it's like, oh, I didn't know what the inclusive ownership fund was going to move people towards worker ownership by shifting shares from, large corporations down to regular workers and put workers onto corporate boards, and then give and if ever a company is floated on the stock market or goes bust or is going to be sold, give workers the right of first refusal to buy out the company. These are all new policies. These are all modern market socialist oriented cooperative policies that that's not what the traditional Labour Party stood for, who would just from a social democratic perspective just put things into control of the state or state-owned enterprises to be able to take them out of the market factors, right? Whereas the right to own and the inclusive ownership fund were explicitly keeping things within the market, but moving them from state ownership to employee ownership, which makes it much harder to reverse. These are new policies. Corbyn is the only person who's bringing anything new to the table with regards to actual political policy making in this country. And people like James, they don't fucking report it because they're too busy going, oh, well, have you seen all of the crazy stuff in the papers, the people lying about pint glasses? I'm like, then ignore it. Who cares? Report on the real things. Fucking hell.
People as something significant, something important, something to be celebrated. So that's why I think we have to talk about it. Would it be completely meta and absurdly self-indulgent of me to add that to the list of questions I'm about to ask you? Should we even be talking about this at all? 034 560 60973. What's James doing on the radio today? Well, he's doing this topic, but the main point of the topic is to ask people calling in whether they should actually be talking about the thing he's encouraging them to ring in and talk about.
It's going to be difficult to take James O'Brien even remotely seriously anymore because of the attitude they had to Corbyn supporters. And like, I mean, believe it, I was frustrated with the Corbyn supporters when they called in, like James O'Brien was saying bullshit and they didn't know how to counteract it. And there was plenty you could have said to defeat the points that James O'Brien would make in response. They maybe should. I mean, fuck it. Let's bring up some more James O'Brien. Let's have James O'Brien talking to Corbyn supporters. We can have a rough idea.
3. Starting Westminster. Seems appropriate. Ken's there. Ken, good morning. What would you like to say?
Hello there. Morning, James. The way I see it is George Osborne represents corporation. He represents the executive. But who in Parliament represents the working class? There's not many people in that group who can't be bought by money. Every man has his price. What strikes me about Jeremy Corbyn is that he's going against the tide.
Where are you getting that from? Where are you getting that from? Because
his entirety of his time in Parliament, the guy who defied the whip over and over again, wouldn't cede to the political pressure of neoliberalism under Blair, right? The guy who opposed the Iraq War was one of the figureheads opposing the Iraq War. The guy who helped broker the fucking like the Good Friday Agreement. Like, this guy's been in politically involved for ages. He's never been parlayed to the political machinations of capital. Why would anyone who has money, who has capital, want to support a socialist, right?
It sounds like forgive me, it sounds a bit like a sort of teenage girl's crush.
What? Literally him saying this is how Jeremy Corbyn's always operated. I guess it's me kind of saying it, but what Corbyn represents, I guess for me it's self-evident, right? But now the onus is upon this caller to then explain that properly to James. We'll see how well they do.
Well, put it this way.
Where are you getting the idea that he's different from all the other politicians from? That's all I'm asking. I don't mean to be rude.
Well, I guess he has been different in the way that he did defy the whip and the way in which he did. They had explicit kind of political prescriptions for the entirety of his time in Parliament, right? He's always, strongly had his kind of firm convictions as a socialist throughout kind of like the New Labour period.
Because what he stands for.
What does he stand for?
Anyone who's brave enough to stand up and use quantitative easing in a term for the working class, you have to sort of look at that and think, hold on a minute, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, go on, tell me. Because it seems to me to mean sort of planting a seed in the hope that a magic money tree will grow.
Well, that's what the banks did to help themselves. So,
brilliant. Like, it's literally just James O'Brien just thinks... Again, this guy is like a frontline journalist, and he's the one parroting this magic money tree garbage. The economy works just like a household budget.
Why can't he's only asking, why can't the people use the same magic to help the people right at the bottom?
Yeah.
We're not saying that people like you, James, shouldn't have the job and the wage you have, and you deserve it. But what I'm saying is that the standard at the bottom needs to be raised for the people who...
Well, the last Labour government increased the tax rate for the nation's highest earners, who I'm, flattered that you include me among. The last Labour government did that. What's new? What's new about Corbyn here?
And this is where you have to talk about the inclusive ownership fund. So we have to talk about what happened with like the right to own, like actual transformative policies. I mean, you could go in and have a long conversation about the merits of demarketisation of utilities, and the failure of private water is a really good one. The failure of privatisation of rail is a good one to go with here. Obviously, energy wasn't as much of a problem then as it is now. My camera's playing silly buggers. Hopefully, it'll fix itself. Let's try reloading Droid Cam. There we go. Right, let me just restart my point that I was making there if my camera will work. In that, this is where you have to talk about, rather than just saying, oh, I think that he's good because he'll raise the minimum wage, we need to talk about the inclusive ownership fund and things like the right to own, talk about the issues with regards to what's happened with marketisation of water and rail, and not quite, and energy wasn't as much of an issue then, but those key issues like water and rail, those are obvious failures of privatisation from the neoliberal period. And you say, well, look, these have failed, we need to bring them back into public ownership. And then the new thing that we're getting is right to own inclusive ownership fund, these kind of things, right?
That's not the solution. So to charge the higher earners more money and kind of make them...
Well, that's the definition of redistribution, Ken.
I don't think that there's a necessity for that.
All right, let's start. Let's start again, okay? Because I think you're making more sense than me.
And even then, James is asking what's good about Jeremy Corbyn. You say these are. I mean, I get it's not new what he's pitching here. There are new things that he did pitch, but these aren't what this caller is saying right now. But the caller is saying, well, look, we have tried and tested things that do work to make the country better, like redistributive policies, like increasing the minimum wage, like having a proper social safety net, like taxes on higher earners. These are things that have proven to work over. These are things which have a the prototype was already there to show the efficacy of these policies. Why stop them now? Surely just these things alone are a better alternative to the neoliberal guff that was proposed in austerity by George Osborne and David Cameron.
But if I was to say that what you're describing to me is a mood rather than an intellectual position, would you be offended?
I wouldn't be offended. I respect every man's opinion, but
I'm hearing a mood. I'm hearing a mood. I mean, we used to do this a lot with UKIP, and they'd make these sort of emotional statements about this, that, and the other, and then you try and pin them down on actual facts. And if it wasn't so tragic, it would be hilarious how few there were. So give me some facts. He stands for fairness. He stands for equality. He stands for this, that, and the other. Well, give me a fact rather than a feeling.
Well, I can only go by what the man says.
Yeah, go on. Then give me the line then. Give me the line that provides you with economic confidence that many, many others aren't sharing.
Well, incredibly, I'm not the most political person, but when I listen to the man speak, there's something about him that makes sense to me and that I believe.
Oh, this is why I'm...
Again, that's the problem. Is you're talking back to feelings now. Because if you had someone who's a little bit more kind of, who was clearly into politics, you go, look, well, neoliberalism has failed. We need to return to the social democratic norms that work in Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, all these places which have, not, I guess, mostly kind of third way countries, like places like Germany are probably more third way countries, but the social democracies of the Nordic countries, right? Like, you don't even need to say to James O'Brien at this point, here is some new fucking socialist policy proposed by Corbyn, even though there were good ones there. You just have to say, look, these countries do better than us in terms of happiness, income equality, overall fairness, and overall kind of how productive the society is, right? And also, much better on economic freedom too, if that's a thing that you care about specifically. I don't, but other people might. You say, look, this we have a blueprint. Take that, put it here, right? Why not? Surely, if things are happier there, we're not going to get. We're not going to get UN delegates coming to the UK to criticise how the Conservatives are treating the disabled, right? Literally, UN probes what happened to saying that disabled people's human rights are being failed by the Conservative government. Like surely that's good enough for you, James. Why is that not good enough?
Jealous. This is why I'm jealous, isn't it? Because I want it to make sense to me. Here you go. Young people like Corbyn, because they do not remember.
And that's true, Joe Biden's boyfriend, Joe.
The economic mess Labour consistently made by spending too much of other people's money. That's what he's up against. Ignorant, ill-informed, Daily Mail-inspired epithets like that.
The thing I see, James...
But you understand that it's ill-informed. You know that it's ill-informed, and you should know that. Literally any kind of even like moderately third-way policy proposal set that obviously Jeremy Corbyn was going to go much further than would be preferable to the Conservatives. You know that it's wrong. You know that it's untrue. You know that it is part of a completely untrue narrative, James. Yet you're still asking for, well, I need to see this whole raft of this future vision from just random members of the public about why the alternative to the Conservatives would be better. God, fucking centrists drive me, boil my fucking piss.
It's once they squeeze the lemons of all the poor people, it's the next bracket.
That's perfect comment, Ross. Absolutely perfect, yeah. The fact that most of Europe has nationalised industries that liberals think is absurd radicalism to even suggest here speaks volumes about their inability to see beyond their own noses. Fucking true. True and base. 100%. You're so great. It's wild to me. And you go like, oh, well, we can't nationalise the energy sector because that'll be like the 1970s. I'm like, all the other fucking countries seem to be doing it okay. That's why France managed to get their energy bills capped at 4% rise rather than the 50% or 100% rise that we're going to see in October over here, right? Turns out that even though it's an old policy or it's from the 1970s, doesn't mean that there isn't efficacy to it. Doesn't mean that, as Martin Lewis was saying, that, because of the way Ofgem is functioning, we're seeing a failure of the competitiveness of the market. The idea that people just deride nationalisation as a tool to fix these issues because it's old or too socialist when the rest of Europe fucking does it, it is like the height of political ignorance. It really is.
up, they'll be going after. You got to understand, there's no limit to.
But I believe that. I happen to believe that. I've been saying that for years. I can't. Maybe it's sounding a bit strange now. It's almost like I've got a kind of blinkers on. But I don't. What are you seeing that I'm not? Apart from a bloke standing up and saying very, very attractive things that are supremely unelectable.
Your argument here, James, is not that the policies are bad or that they don't have positive utility. All your argument here is, oh, this is unelectable. Maybe it'd be electable if you talked about the good things about those policies rather than just deride it for the idea that people might not like it. Again, you're a journalist. It's your job to tell people whether you think policies are good or not. Yankoid Devils, very much. Thank you much for the follow. Welcome to the No Justice stream.
I see hope. You know, the only chance, the only chance there is, because everybody else in that room who is making the choices in our lives isn't really living in our situation. They haven't walked today or much in the shoes of someone who will get.
Nor is he really. I mean, but you're right. Empathy. You don't actually. It's a ridiculous thing to suggest that you actually have to be homeless to have sympathy for
I mean, fair enough. James retreading his steps
homeless
there.
people, or indeed that you have to put Syrian people in your back bedroom to have sympathy.
Oh yeah, well, the UK is well going down the US's pipeline at this point, like super fast. Same shit. Almost to the point where they're probably going to dismantle the NHS sometime soon.
For Syrian refugees, you're not going to help me here, are you? You've just got it, and I haven't at the moment.
You have to be truly in touch with the people to understand.
Oh, save me, mate. The people are rejecting him hugely. It's a small number of grassroots activists and members of the choir that are persuaded so far. That's just a statistical fact. You can't tell me I'm out of touch with the people. I'm out of touch with you, but I'm in touch with the massive majority of people.
No, I think unfortunately, the people at the bottom, or what you look at in terms of salaries, you've got an elite at the top, and they are.
Yeah, his problem is this guy's just not arguing well. This guy's not. There's no substantive understanding of the way in which the new policy platforms need to shift here. Again, I guess it's from 2015, so it's a long time ago, but
way out of the atmosphere. They've hit stratospheric power.
I guess my point here isn't really to critique the people arguing with James O'Brien. It's to critique James O'Brien specifically for just saying, oh, we can't have change because change is unelectable, rather than arguing for the utility of the policies being proposed or for the vision being proposed.
And the people at the bottom have really forgotten about.
Look, let me read you a text. Here's a tweet from someone at the bottom. And this is the point that I think your lot are completely missing. Is this is where the narrative wrongly and inaccurately has been pushed. But you have people out there apparently possessed of a
Then counteract the narrative, James. You're on the radio. It's your job.
Functioning brain who write about the myth of the so-called poor. This is from Stephen, that the threshold has risen because of all the benefits they get, houses full of flat screens and video games. He's bang on. That's what we're up against, the notion that there aren't any poor people anymore. I could open up the phone lines now, and there are actually people out there with people who are allowed to drive cars who will say that because you've got a mobile phone you can't possibly be poor, and you're sticking up for people who are poor in a country where the media narrative is telling you they don't exist. So why?
Okay, so James, you acknowledge there's a media narrative, right? This is where people are getting misled from, and then again, well, at least we have the proof now. At least we have the proof that the issue about massive lying campaigns have been it's been how politicians have functioned for ages, and I would argue that it is far worse for people to be lying about whether or not poor people exist, when they were essentially being systematically culled by the Conservative administration, right? People dying because they missed like appointments at the job centre. Disabled people dying because they didn't have access to the correct support because of dehumanising work capability assessments, right? These things were happening at the time. Did James O'Brien report about them? Of course he fucking didn't, right? And he acknowledges here that the narrative is incorrect, but he doesn't have this massive, long rant about how, all trust in politics is shat through the windscreen. He would just go, this is just how it works. Yes. So the fact that Boris Johnson is lying about stamps printed on pint glasses is completely irrelevant and it's just a fly in the ointment compared to what's happening right now in front of his fucking nose.
Why?
Or, I guess what happened right in front of his fucking nose 7 years ago.
Why is Corbyn pulling this up? Why is he attractive to people like you? Keith's in Shoreditch. From Ken to Keith, all the Ks today. Keith, what have you got?
Hello, mate. The way I look at it is we believe that the market is going to answer all our prayers, yeah? And
no, I don't.
Yes, sir. Fucking this guy knows. This guy knows what's happening.
Capitalists do, but I don't personally.
Well, I think a lot of people run along with that.
If you don't believe that, then support Corbyn. James, what the fuck are you doing? If you don't think the market is going to support is good in every instance, like the fucking neoliberals seem to think so, right? Use your platform to advocate for that. You use your platform to opine about your opinions all the time, James. You've always done that, and it's good that you do that. You're absolutely well within your right to, and you probably should do. I mean, it's called leading Britain's conversation for a reason, right? So you should be trying to do that. That's good that you do that, James, right? But then when you're saying, well, I think of a reason to vote for him, when you're literally agreeing with Corbyn in this segment right now about the failure of markets.
That one, and that's what we've been running on with
Gordon
for
Brown didn't.
3 decades. He seemed to be very much on the side of big business, though, didn't he?
What does that even...
Yes, he literally did. He literally, like, what, Gordon Brown, like, nationalised part of Royal Bank of Scotland because of the financial crisis? That's literally the only thing that he did, and he did it as a necessary measure to be able to control the recession and control what was happening with the global financial crisis. Nothing to do with any kind of ideological, understanding of the failure of markets from his end, right?
even mean, Keith? What does that even... I'm going to have one of those mornings, aren't I?
If you open a coffee shop and you're a small business, you've got no chance because you're up against Starbucks, Costa.
So what's Corbyn going to do for them? What's Corbyn going to do for small... Why are you talking to me about coffee shops?
Well, because if you're a small business, I'm just using that as an example. If you're a small business, you're up against it because all the time the big business...
But what is Corbyn going to do for you?
Yeah, this is the wrong. This caller again they've gone the wrong way. Instead of talking about fucking small business owners, talk about people at the bottom, right? Talk, people on low wages. Talk about nationalisation. Talk about these big systemic changes that need to happen to fix the system, rather than whether or not a small coffee shop can survive. Which I think it was a reasonable issue. But when you're talking about big changes that it needed from like a substantive ideological policy-driven perspective, I don't think it's really where the line needs to be drawn.
OK, here I am. I've just opened a little coffee shop in Kidderminster, and there's a Starbucks over the road, and I need help. What's Jeremy going to do for me, mate?
Well, hopefully he's not going to do anything. Hopefully,
Well, why are you talking about it then?
Richard Murphy, who is his tax advisor, has always said...
Okay. Talking about Richard Murphy, okay, we're bringing it back. We're bringing it back.
If you're looking at Richard Murphy and what he says about tax evasion...
I've read his book, The Joy of Tax. I know exactly who you're talking about. You're going to have to trust me on this. I'm not coming to this as an innocent or an ignorant. I'm just coming to this as...
And you agree. And then why do you not support him? Like, this is just driving me around the fucking bend.
Someone who wants to get on the bus, but everybody who's on the bus is just sort of talking gibberish to me.
But the bus isn't who you should be listening to. It's Richard fucking Murphy who you should be listening to. If you're happy with the things that Richard Murphy is opining in his the prescriptions that he's making in the books that you tell me that you've read, right? Then you should be able to say, well, I agree with at least this part of it, which is at least better than huge scores of people dying just having their benefits slashed or having their disability payments removed.
Well, that's not gibberish. If we can get...
You're talking about coffee shops.
I'm talking about small business. If we can get these big businesses to pay their fair share of tax, small businesses will be able to make more money, and that will feed through to the rest of us. It's just a different way of thinking about it.
No, but again, that's something that theoretically, historically, I would agree with. All of these, I just don't understand why you think Corbyn's the man to deliver it. And the most interesting...
Because he said that he has the economic advice from Richard Murphy. You said you liked literally 3 seconds ago.
Exchange I've witnessed from the pros rather than the amateurs like ours. The pros, the most interesting exchange is when I've seen one, I can't remember who.
Corbyn has these ideas by this person. I agree with these ideas, but the people who support him can't convince me, rather than the things that Jeremy Corbyn and his and the people behind his policy platforms tell me is good. I agree with the policy platform, but the supporters can't convince me, even though the guy writing his tax policy might be able to convince me. I'm just speechless listening to what James O'Brien's saying here.
It was, but Philip Collins, who's a big Blairite, was effectively saying these people would rather espouse principles than be in power. And politics is all about winning power. And I don't know, maybe I've been in this game too long. To me,
maybe talk about the principles that you do like, that you've told us that you like, and maybe we can propagate some ideas that might help get those things into power. Have you never considered that, James, using your platform to do such a thing, which he's very happy to do now? He's very happy to say why we should get behind Keir Starmer, windfall tax, etc., blah, 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 meaningful opposition to the Conservative Party. But then when it's Jeremy Corbyn, he's like, oh, well, hang on a minute, I need the masses to convince me. I'm like, come on.
Stand up with principles that are all shiny and box fresh, but in the knowledge that you're never going to get elected just seems a waste of time. Maybe I've gone too far. Maybe I've turned. Maybe you're right.
Do you think so, James?
And I don't want to have a scrap today. I really don't. I want to sort of understand a little better the passion for Jeremy Corbyn, because it's a morning upon which we've learned his own front bench colleagues are planning to defenestrate him. A coup could well be underway by shortly after Christmas, and simultaneously many of his critics within the party who didn't accept front bench positions or didn't get offered them have seized key policy positions, chairing the policy committee. So you've got a man that's the former Shadow Chancellor Chris Leslie, who's described Corbyn's economic policy as guaranteed to lead to higher inflation and higher cost of living. He's got a committee. He's chairing the Treasury Committee. You've got Ian Austin, who tweeted...
Oh, I wonder what the Treasure Committee are going to say about those kind of things, right? I wonder who they are, who they get lobbied by to say these kind of things. I wonder who they use as their policy advisors, other than, maybe like free market think tanks who have a vested interest in these things, continually staying within the markets rather than being nationalised. I wonder why they might say such a thing. Like, they use these scare tactics to convince people that Corbyn would be so bad. I wonder why they might say that. Strange.
I'm getting a little tired.
He can't even think behind. He can't think behind the narrative, right?
The self-indulgent comfort zone fantasy that Corbyn could ever persuade mainstream voters to make him PM. He's going to be chairing the the Education Committee. Well, Shabana Mahmood, who said she strongly disagreed with Mr. Corbyn's economic policies, will be chairing the Justice Committee. That is a shambles, right? But he's got something that some people find deeply, deeply attractive. I want to know what it is. Robert's in Sittingbourne. Robert, what's going on?
Oh, good morning, James. You want a bit of flesh? You were talking...
Don't put it like that. You make me sound like a pervert.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry to put it that way. You were talking about coffee shops. Well, one policy of Jeremy is to introduce an investment bank to help small businesses. There's a new...
Fucking based. There we go. Let's fucking go.
The investment starvation by the big banks. There are lots of good small businesses going to the wall because the banks will not invest in them. That's one...
You mean they're going to the wall because they're not making enough money, is what you're telling me?
No, that's not quite... Well, if you could get some small business people on the phone, you'd find...
You can't do that. You can't ring me up to tell me what I'm missing and then say, oh, no, sorry, I'm not the man for this. You need to get someone else on. You've just told me a lot of businesses are failing, which historically would suggest...
No. You just didn't believe him. You just didn't believe what he was saying. It's like, well, I'm just relaying the things I've heard from other people. It's like, well, I can't speak to them, but you're telling me I don't believe you. Like, well, what else do you expect this fucking guy on the phone to do, James?
Suggest that a lot of businesses aren't making enough money to survive. Jeremy Corbyn's going to give them money to help them. What's wrong with customers giving them the money?
That's not the only you well know that's not the only reason businesses fail. If banks refuse to lend them money to invest...
but you're not even talking from... Don't make me sound like a monster, Rob. You're not even talking from experience. You're talking about some theoretical...
Who cares? Who cares about this experience or not? This is the same kind of standpoint epistemology garbage that you get from a bunch of leftoids.
Small business people who might ring me up later. Talk to me from Robert in Sittingbourne's perspective. What is attractive about this man?
Okay, well, that's one.
No, isn't it? Just this perspective doesn't matter. What he's talking about is macroeconomic things that are going to change to be able to make things better en masse for everybody. If you're saying, well, what's he specifically saying that's good for you? I was like, well, I don't care specifically what's good for me. I care what's good for the country in general.
No, that's been scratched. What is attractive about this man from your position? Not something that someone who might ring in later might tell me if we're all lucky.
Well, okay. Well, I could tell you about his honesty and integrity, but that's separate. Renationalising the railways will be a very good move. Now, you can't say that's not popular because opinion polls show a majority of people want the railways to be run.
True. This caller's I'm big fan of this caller. This guy.
Nationalised, isn't that so?
And well, his mode of doing it. Just talk me through the detail.
Well, as the franchises come up for renewal, is a cheap way of doing it.
So if you know you're going to lose your franchise...
Oh, yes, fucking go. This guy knows exactly what's up.
When you're currently in position running a railway line or a railway company, why the hell would you spend any money at all on the future infrastructure if you know it's been taken away from you at the end of the contract?
Well, they've got contractual obligations. They must...
Why would they go beyond those contractual obligations in any way, shape or form?
Well, it doesn't matter, because once they've gone, we can then put the investment in to be able to change it once they've been renationalised, James. Oh, God. It's just... Again, it's literally... like what we're talking about previously, Rosa, about like the liberal blinkers where they can't see anything past what exists right now. Like, well, there might be a period of 6 months where we won't get the proper investment in the rail infrastructure. I'm like, A, was that ever coming in the first place? And second of all, most of the railway and even what little investment in the railway infrastructure does come from, it is from rail track, which is run by the government, right? The franchises just skim off the top half the time. Right? This is meaningless track. This is from a guy who just doesn't understand like the train networks here. From James.
I'm a regular traveller on the railways. I don't see...
Well, I'm a regular traveller on the railways as well. It doesn't qualify me to comment upon the wisdom of Jeremy Corbyn's proposals.
can I just? I don't actually see the private railway companies going beyond their contractual obligations. In fact, in my personal,
Well, of course they wouldn't go out beyond their contractual obligations, because spending extra money on that would reduce the shareholder dividend payout, which is what they exist to do.
been travelling on the railways for over 40 years plus, and I don't actually see much improvement in the railway.
Really, you think the trains that you're travelling on are the same ones you were travelling on 40 years ago, mate? You need to get a new season ticket. And back to Corbyn. I haven't satisfactorily expressed my own position, but I feel I've talked more than enough.
Well, that's probably enough for that particular segment, but it just understands my frustration about just how liberals just can't see the wood for the trees. And James O'Brien he's just the epitome of not seeing the wood for the trees, no like long range perspective, no understanding of like how the way narratives are done, and like weird or odd priorities, right? How he understands that the government we have now is bad. In these conversations we're having, the government we had right now, current with Boris Johnson, right, and previously what they had with David Cameron, right, and this at both of these same times, at the moment when it's Keir Starmer is the alternative, it's like we have to get Boris Johnson out. Everyone has to support Keir Starmer. If you don't get behind Keir Starmer, all you're doing is allow Boris Johnson to run rampant with his crown-shaped symbols on pint glasses, right? But previously, when it was Jeremy Corbyn, it was like, oh, well, I know that all the UN probe into disability human rights violations is bad, and I know a bunch of poor people dying, and I know the media are lying about it as well, but unless you give me a good reason to support Corbyn, well, I guess I'm just going to have to support the people who want to cull the disabled and the poor. I'm sorry. Like, this crazy, like, double standard with regards to the left, and just this unwillingness to properly engage with the policy prescriptions being put forward by the people who he's asked to bring on his show. And he's not even given the proper rebuttals. It is a journey inside the mind of a liberal, what we just saw there. And it's incredibly frustrating. And, then he's just going to continue to do it, continue to not have any perspective, continue to not have any understanding of a lot of the things he even tries to talk about. I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about politics. I like to talk about it because it's fun. But I know more than this fucking guy does, and he has his own radio show. Maybe I should be getting paid as much as he does to chat shit on twitch.tv about political prescriptions. I guess I'm more educated than I was in 2015, but regardless, even so, it's just frustrating to hear him listen to people go, these are good policies that we can do, and him go, well, actually, or unless you fully convince me on the Corbyn train, I guess I'm going to have to vote for the poverty police. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this content, future YouTube viewers, please consider liking and subscribing. It always helps if you leave a comment below for the algorithmic purposes so that more people can see my content. If you click the bell, it will notify when I go live and when I release new videos. And you can also go into the video description and find my Twitch channel to follow and possibly subscribe there if you want to give me money. And also all the rest of my other links to my social medias. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.